And we know that from the evidence and from what they're telling us, here's our suspects.
What do you think should happen to these people?
Honestly, I believe that they should be held for 4 days with some guys doing the same exact thing to them, but that's the military in me, and that's how I am at heart.
You know what? I'm going to call the police in a second. You better split. Can you just tell us where you were in April? I got nothing to say to you. You understand that?
Hey you, and welcome. My name is Mike, and in this old video, I have a story for you. I mean, it's a mystery, it's a saga, and it's one that went on for over a dozen years. Perhaps even a baker's dozen. We start off in New York, before going down to South Carolina, which are, I mean, New York and South Carolina, that's two heavy hitter states right there. So you know we're off to a good start. And this is a story about, you know, of twists, of turns, of rumors, of false allegations, and you know, you got some good old, like, knee-slapping incompetence, like, thrown in there for good measure. This will cover from April 2009 to May 2022, and it is about an evil monster. You know, you look through the thesaurus trying to find, you know, other words to use instead of, like, the usual, but sometimes you just gotta go with the classics, and evil monster works pretty well in this case. I'm itching to get into this one, so let's do just that. Let's give it a go. We start off in Rochester, New York, and we're going to the town of Chile, though it's pronounced Chile. Wiley, where in 2009, 17-year-old Brittanee Drexel was not having a great time of it. Our Brittanee was born October 7th, 1991 to John and Dawn. As teen, you know, unmarried parents, you know, things were tough, and pressure made the couple make like a banana and split before Brittanee was born. Dawn later ended up meeting and falling in love with Chad Drexel, who would go on to adopt and raise Brittanee as his own daughter. Chad and Dawn, in fact, got married shortly before Dawn gave birth to Brittanee. Now Chad, he served in the US Navy, but he would eventually leave that behind for life on Civvy Street, and the family settled in Chile. The couple went on to have another 2 children, giving Brittanee a little brother and a little sister, Marissa and Camden. Now Brittanee, growing up, you know, she was like a girl's girl. She had the hair did always perfectly, you know, the nails painted, but also she was like on the soccer team. She was on the track team. She's got one of those people who makes everybody else look bad. She could do it all. She was known for her blistering speed and the ability to outrun everyone she competed with. By the way, Brittanee's like distinctive sapphire eyes, that was actually the result of a condition she was born with. She required several pretty serious surgeries when she was still an infant, and that would leave her blind in her right eye. She'd wear contact lenses to counteract the eye's tendency to wander, and that gave her eyes that extra sparkle. Like, it wasn't a filter, her eyes genuinely looked like that. Unlike mine, which just looked like I am dead. So let's kick, and by kick I mean punch, this story into gear. And that was April 2009. Now things were rough. Brittanee's parents were going through a divorce, and Brittanee was not taking it too well at all. It took a huge toll on her. 2 times, Brittanee took overdoses of her mother's medication. Such were the struggles that she was enduring. Now, Brittanee's father later told an interviewer that Brittanee had actually taken much less than they had initially thought, and the doctors and family were now of the opinion it was more of a cry for help than any attempt at finding a definitive ending. As is so often the case, you know, Brittanee, she just wanted to be woken up in a situation that was better than the one she went to sleep in. But she never was. On the 22nd of April 2009, 17-year-old Brittanee asked her mother if she could go to Myrtle Beach with her boyfriend, John Greco, and a few older girls she knew. Understandably, her mother said nope, as she didn't know the people Brittanee was asking to go with. She couldn't trust if they would look out for her, and she was only 17 years old after all. Dawn just wasn't happy with the complete lack of parental supervision, so far away from home and family. Well, we all know, you know, what happens in South Carolina, right? And none of it is good. ever. And my bias here is it's most definitely not, influenced by the amount of murder cases I cover coming from that state. I don't know what you're talking about. You sound like a crazy person right now. This meant for several hours the mother and the daughter not really talking, just exchanging a few angry words every now and then, but it'll pass. No. In the end, Brittanee said, well, if you're not going to let me go down to Myrtle Beach, can I go to a friend's house, over in Rochester, and things will just both cool off being away from each other. And her mother said, you know what? That sounds like a good idea. But of course, Dawn wanted to talk to Brittanee's friend's mother to, confirm that Brittanee would actually be going where she said she was going. But of course, come on, Brittanee just got her friend to pretend to be her mother. And then she was like, yeah, things will be fine. Wink, wink. I hope she didn't say wink, wink. She told Dawn, everything you can imagine she would want to hear. And then Dawn said, right, off you head, And then with that, Brittanee headed with her friends down to Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. In the end, John, Brittanee's boyfriend, he actually couldn't go due to work commitments. But she was going, with some of the gals she knew, from town. So she snuck off, despite her mother forbidding it, which is, nothing strange at all for a teenage girl to do. But, it's not off to a great start here either. Wait till you see where it ends. Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, it's a party town, especially over the spring break when our story takes place. Drinking, partying, chicks, hell yeah! Shortly after arriving, Brittanee called her mother Dawn saying, guess where I am? Well, no, she didn't actually say that. She just told Dawn, her mother, that she was at the beach. To which Dawn presumed she meant the beach in Rochester, 20 minutes down the road, not the beach multiple hours down the road in several states away. And so when Dawn heard this, she was like, hey, glad you're having a good time just down the road, I'm cooling off myself. Go out, enjoy yourself. Have a good time. But only a day into her trip, Brittanee started feeling kind of alienated from the friends she went with. All of the girls were a little bit older than Brittanee, and so they were, a little bit more heavily into the drinking and the drugs and all that kind of stuff, the traditional, spring break party scene. And Brittanee was like, I'll just stick to the Bud Light, thanks. So she started to do more things alone and went for walks, took the time to relax by herself, thinking, okay, maybe this is kind of like a bit shit now. Everybody's off their tits on drugs. A little bit sick of it.
Hey, Brett.
What?
Brittanee and her boyfriend John were in constant, regular contact with each other. Barely 5 minutes could pass without a text being exchanged. So when John messaged Brittanee and he didn't receive a reply within the normal couple of minutes, he quickly got worried and even sent a follow-up text telling Brittanee that if he didn't hear from her within another 10 minutes, he was going to have to call her mother and tell her the truth about where Brittanee was and what she'd been up to. Those 10 minutes must have felt like a lifetime to John, his phone, ringing out without buzzing. So then John called Dawn to let her know what was really going on. Dawn quickly went from furious, as you can imagine, to absolutely frantic when she herself could not get through, to her daughter, and she was calling one of her friends. Nobody else could get through to Brittanee. I mean, she's all the way in upstate New York. Her daughter, hundreds of miles away. Like, going out of your mind is like the word that comes to mind. Being in Rochester, 14 hours and 800 miles from Myrtle Beach, Dawn was in a difficult position. She couldn't even call the police and report her daughter missing directly. She had to have a friend of Brittanee's, who lived in South Carolina, drive over to the Myrtle Beach police station and file a police report on the family's behalf. The police, knowing a minor was involved and with Brittanee's, history of depression, they did quickly spring into action, searching to try and find her. They didn't, faff about too much. They started with the Bar Harbor Hotel where Brittanee was staying, but they found nothing out of place, no sign of a struggle, and all her clothes still in her suitcase in her room. Her phone and purse weren't found in the room, so investigators knew whatever had happened to Brittanee probably hadn't happened in the hotel, that she'd been out and she hadn't come back. Last anyone knew was her texts with John, but before that there was a phone call in which her friend asked for a pair of shorts Brittanee had borrowed. So that was where she had gone to bring those shorts back to her friend. She'd actually been with another friend at their accommodation when she got the call. all along the route she would have taken to return the shorts to the friend. CCTV was checked. They got lucky when they found footage of Brittanee leaving the Blue Water Resort 10 minutes after she arrived. She went to visit a friend at the Blue Water Resort, got a call from another friend asking for the shorts, and then she left. But that was the last thing anyone could find of her. There was nothing more. She'd just gone, vanished. Brittanee was in her hotel. She went then to a friend's room in a different hotel. Then she got the call to go and bring her friend's shorts back. So she was leaving this hotel to go back to her own to get the shorts, but she never made it somewhere, during that short couple of minutes walk. She's gone. No more footage could be found along the route, so investigators they began to theorize that maybe she had gotten into a car. Which then begs the question, did she get in willingly or was it unwilling? Was she taken? Was she kidnapped? As the hours passed, concerns grew and the search broadened. Investigators started talking to Brittanee's friends and family, focusing on those who'd gone down to Myrtle Beach for spring break. There was one friend from New York who grabbed their attention in particular. As I said, he was a friend all the way from Rochester, and his name was Peter Brozowitz. Sharing a similar group of friends in Rochester, Brittanee and Peter had known each other for around 5 years. Brittanee's boyfriend John was actually relieved when he heard Peter would be there, because, he was like, well, I know Peter, right? He's a sound lad, and now he has somebody who he trusts, who can, keep an eye on his girlfriend just to make sure, everything's okay. They hadn't planned on meeting up in Myrtle Beach, but had bumped into one another at a nightclub, and then they had arranged to meet up the next day. Brozowitz, along with 4 of his friends, was the friend Brittanee was with when she got the call asking for her to return the borrowed clothing. The 5 were staying at the Blue Water Hotel, and were admittedly the last person to have seen Brittanee before she disappeared. Brozowitz became an early suspect when, in a piece of suspicious timing, he and his friends would suddenly pack up and leave Myrtle Beach. Get out of town! Even leaving clothing and the security deposit behind them, before lawyering up immediately back in his arrival in Rochester. Interesting.
There is breaking news tonight of the disappearance of missing child teen Brittanee Drexel.
Suspected of being present with Brittanee, knowing her whereabouts.
Investigators in Myrtle Beach have 3 to 4 persons of interest in the case. They say they're closing in.
The last time anyone heard from Brittanee Drexel was on Saturday night when she sent a text message to one of her friends. Without getting permission from her mother, 17-year-old Brittanee Drexel left Rochester, New York for a spring break trip to Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. Police have now identified Peter Brozowitz, the last known person with her, as a person of interest in the disappearance.
So Petey, the last person to see Brittanee, allegedly. I mean, what seemed though from the outset to be kind of obvious signs of guilt was kind of what just everybody would do themselves if they were in his position. Like some of the things that were like, oh, we're guilty, the clothes that were left behind, that was like some bathing suits, shit like that. The reason they didn't get their deposit back wasn't because they were in a rush. They tried to get their deposit back. They just couldn't get it. And then of course, lawyering up. Well, I've covered quite a lot of criminal cases and it's a good idea. Never speak to the police without a lawyer. Luckily for them, they left a paper trail in some emails back and forth with the hotel management, which was eventually enough to convince the investigators that things weren't quite as they had been reported, and they cleared Peter as a suspect. And he cooperated with them fully throughout the investigation, so they had to look to other leads as to where Brittanee had disappeared to.
The largest coordinated search for Brittanee Drexel is coming to an end. 2 weeks ago, the 17-year-old vanished from Myrtle Beach, and still, tonight, no one knows where she is.
Well, the streets of Myrtle Beach offered no answers. Leads disappeared like the crowds do after spring break is over. For the next 7 years, there was little movement in the search for Brittanee Drexel. Investigators would come up with several names of people of interest, but none of them went too much further. Certainly not far enough to bring charges. In June 2016, maybe to keep the case alive and in people's minds, The FBI held a press conference and announced they were now working on the theory that Brittanee had been held for several days before being murdered and the body dumped.
We believe she traveled to this area around McClellanville and the North Charleston, South Georgetown area, and we believe she was killed after that. We're here today seeking the help from the public, from you, the media, and helping us get the word out about that. We know this is a great community. We know there's great people here. We know there's people that saw something, heard something, that has information that could lead us to closing out this investigation and bringing closure to this family who's dealt with this awful tragedy. After this, we urge anyone with information, no matter how insignificant you think it is, no matter how small, if you think we already have that information, to please call in to the tip lines and let us know.
Now, they didn't put any names out there or kind of cite their sources for why this would be their leading line of inquiry and the theories, but they did offer a $25,000 reward for, any information. Unsurprisingly, it didn't take very long. Dollar bills will kind of do that for a huge influx of tips to reach the FBI, with one in particular catching the FBI's attention. A South Carolina inmate named Taquan Brown told his bond hearing, and eventually investigators from the FBI, that not long after Brittanee's disappearance, he'd gone to a stash house in McClellanville, a small fishing town just over an hour's drive from Myrtle Beach. While he was there, he claimed to have witnessed Drexel in a house with like 10 other guys.
On this Monday, April 27th, I saw the girl.
In the stash house?
Yeah, it was about 12 guys in there.
Brown says Drexel had a black eye and was being sexually assaulted. Did you recognize her right away?
No, I didn't even know who she was. I didn't know who she was until actually like a few weeks later when everything started coming on the news.
Over the phone, Brown described the stash house to me, and it was consistent with the house I saw when I went to McClellanville to investigate.
Then he changed his story to Brittanee being assaulted by a man named Timothy Deshawn Taylor. Now, Taylor would have been just 16 at the time, and Brown said he was at the house to pay back a debt to Taylor's father, Sean. Brown went on to claim that after he saw Brittanee try to escape the house, she'd been pistol whipped by Taylor, and as Brown was leaving the property, he heard 2 gunshots, which he presumed was Drexel being killed. He naturally said nothing. Brown said he later saw what he thought was Drexel's body being removed from the house wrapped in a carpet. He thought it had been disposed of in an alligator pit. Now, despite Brown's word being the only, evidence to go on, the police were like, right, we got him. Ladies and gentlemen, we got him. With nothing else supporting Brown, they still went after, the Taylors, junior and senior, full force. Now, Taquan Brown was serving 25 years in prison for voluntary manslaughter, but, you might think they might have taken his allegations with, pinch of salt, just a little bit. After all, as soon as he gave these tips, he was like, can I get some better food and maybe some more visitation and a better place and yada yada yada, kind of what the demands, as in, this is bullshit? Now, Timothy Taylor had already served out a sentence for his part in a robbery of a McDonald's in 2011, in which someone was shot. Taylor had acted as a getaway driver, and after pleading guilty, he was sentenced to parole, and by 2016 he had finished serving his sentence. So he did have a history, and the FBI decided to use that against him, during the investigation into Brittanee Drexel's disappearance. The FBI decided to bring the same charges against him in federal court this time. Now, I hear you barking, big dog, good old woof woof coming out of you. What a double jeopardy. He can't be tried for the same crime twice. He already went on trial, he was already got his sentence, yada yada yada. How can they bring it back, to him again? Well, there's also a law which says that if you, are tried and convicted and sentenced, but if the sentence is kind of deemed unduly, lenient, they can haul your ass back in and say, no, you actually, that's not enough for you. No, we got to tack on some more years onto whatever you got. What? Timothy Taylor just got probation, while the other two people involved in that robbery, they got much more, significantly longer sentences. One got 25 to life. So they were like, well, Tim, you kind of got off easy here, maybe a little bit too easy. So they said, put him back on trial. This is insane. With Taylor getting parole, it was easy to argue his sentence wasn't harsh enough in comparison. And unfortunately for Timothy Taylor again, because he'd already pled guilty, during the original sentencing, hence why he only got parole, well, that would kind of supersede anything else he would say. So if he'd ended up going back, he would be automatically would plead guilty again. So he was kind of FUCK'd with the other, he was gone, he was done so. Basically, the feds had him kind of over a barrel, and they knew it, and they were using this against him, as in, where's Brittanee Drexel? Where's Brittanee Drexel? You want to go back to prison for many, many years? Where is she?
I may as well start with the obvious question. Did you kill Brittanee Drexel?
No, sir. I did not kill Brittanee Drexel.
Were you involved in the kidnapping of Brittanee Drexel?
No, sir, I was not.
Were you with Brittanee Drexel the night she disappeared in April of 2009?
No, sir. I was not with her.
What do you know about Taquan Brown? Do you know him?
No, sir.
You've never met him?
Never met him. Never personally met him. I wouldn't say I know I don't know him, but if I did met him, I don't remember him or anything, but...
Basically, the feds had him over a barrel and they knew it. Knowing that they had him in a corner, they started pushing for information on Brittanee Drexel. Facing years, maybe even decades in prison, Taylor continued to insist he knew nothing about Brittanee, and he was subjected to multiple interrogations and lie detector tests. And he would pass these lie detector tests, but the police would come out and say, no, you know what? They would go to Brittanee Drexel's family and say, he's a lying bastard, he's failing these, which was untrue. Of course, as we all know, we always talk about lie detector tests, right? And they are bullshit. They are inadmissible, and that's absolute bullshit. There's a million reasons why you could fail a lie detector test that have nothing to do with whether you were speaking the true or not so that. So, but what they were using this as just an intimidation tactic, They were just beating this into him any way they could. They were hammers, and he was a goddamn nail.
Today on an all-new Dr. Phil, missing at spring break.
She's seen on a traffic cam. Then she disappears. The jailhouse informant said she tried to flee. They caught her.
We were told they shot her, and then she was put into an alligator pit.
You believe you handed a flyer to the man that killed your daughter?
I don't think I know I did.
For the first time, the man accused speaks out.
Do you know who killed Brittanee Drexel?
In an appearance on the Dr. Phil show, her father, Chad, would allege that he had encountered Timothy Taylor earlier in the course of handing out flyers when Brittanee first disappeared.
I handed out flyers to cars that passed me, a couple cars that passed me. They took them nicely and left. Then the very last car was half two-tone car. It was white in the top, black in the bottom. And when I stopped the car, they didn't want to stop at first, and here I am standing in the middle of this dirt-type road in a rural neighborhood. And they finally stopped just before me, and I handed the flyer to the driver. The two people in the back were whispering something, and then I put my head in and I said, hey, have you guys seen this missing girl? I'm her dad. Do you guys know anything about this? And they laughed, and I said, well, could you just take this anyways to the driver? He took it. That's when they crumpled up the flyer and threw it out and sped off as they were all laughing. Now, he was leaning on the car like this, so I could see that there was no arm there. Well, that was the key factor. When I got back to the private investigators, they said, you know who you just met? And I said, no. That's Timothy Deshawn Taylor.
Chad said he was absolutely certain that it was Taylor, and he was so sure of Taylor's guilt, he publicly called for violent retribution, for all hell to rain down on the Taylors. And unsurprisingly, it did.
He is leading the whole let's snatch her, let's keep her, the raping. He's the person that's doing all the bad. And we know that from the evidence and from what they're telling us, here's our suspects.
What do you think should happen to these people?
Honestly, I believe that they should be held for 4 days with some guys doing the same exact thing to them, but that's the military in me, and that's how I am at heart.
Timothy Taylor's mother lost her job, his father's business fell apart, and his sister, she was, so many allegations about her in her workplace. She would go in, people would be whispering and talking about her behind her back. Like, the ruin your life type shit. Things got so bad for the Taylor family that at one point, Timothy and his dad Sean, they considered, maybe we should just confess. Even though they knew they didn't do anything, they were like, our lives are being ruined regardless. Maybe if we just confess, this will all be over. Like, the FBI used considerable resources to search the alleged stash house in McClellanville, as well as several alligator pits in the area. All to no avail. The Taylors were never involved in Brittanee's disappearance. It wasn't until very, very recently, and when I say very recently, I mean 2022, with huge advances in like mobile, cell phone tracking technology that, they finally were able to get something. And shockingly, it had nothing to do with the Taylor family at all. The investigators were able to pinpoint a very narrow window to when Brittanee must have been taken. Finally, 13 years after she vanished, they could start to nail down some aspects of the case and try to come at it with fresh eyes. This led them to a traffic camera on Ocean Boulevard, where Brittanee had been walking, and to the image of a vehicle that had been passing. This vehicle. The sister of the owner of that car was somebody they spoke to like a decade before. Her name was Angel Voss. And Angel was dating a registered sex offender. Classic. A piece of shit name of Raymond Moody. Moody was actually one of the names raised all the way back in 2011 as a person of interest. This was because a relative of Moody's called the police, suggesting they take a look at him.
Do you know anything about the missing teenager?
No, I do not.
Can you tell us where you were back in April of '09?
Goodbye. You know what? I'm going to call the police in a second. You better split. Can you just tell us where you were in April of 09? I got nothing to say to you. You understand that?
Do you know?
That report, coupled with him staying at a motel in the area and his long history of violent sexual offenses towards young girls in particular. He was exactly the type of piece of shit they were looking for. Unfortunately, that's as far as their knowledge of his movement at the time went, even though they searched his place. There just wasn't enough to move his name to the suspect list. Even though Moody's partner, Angel, she told the police that this was exactly his sort of thing.
But he just made the threat that I could disappear just as easily as she did. That they mean nothing to him. They're just like a toy in his toy box. Well, he's gonna rape them for hours, and then he's gonna get rid of them. It won't be anybody's disappearance. Just the dreams he says he has, like dreams of hanging somebody from a tree and then cutting their guts open and letting the blood run all over. They just took the sign down from McDonald's, because we were there the other day. And he said something about, oh, they took the sign down, and I looked up and I said, what sign? And he said, the one with that group on it. And I said, when did they take it down? He said, I don't know, but I was tired of looking at it every day when I had to drive back and forth to work. Walk in their house in the middle of the day. And it didn't scare him. He'd follow them home, and he'd follow them from school and stuff like that. No, because he says, I'll disappear and they'll never find me. I got children. I don't want to disappear and never be found.
Now the police were thinking that maybe Angel herself was involved in whatever happened to Brittanee. Maybe they were in it together. They once almost made the suspect list. Now they definitely made it, with the car being in the same area Brittanee was taken. They spoke to Angel once more, who wasn't really having any of it. I mean, she wasn't really having any of it because they initially were asking her questions about 62-year-old Raymond Moody, her partner. Piece of shit, sex offender who, they had spoken to her about it before. But now they were kind of like, well, you can see she'll storm out and she'll quickly come back in when they're like, oh no, we actually have questions about you. Like, were you involved in it?
Did you have any involvement in picking up Brittanee Drexel?
Hell no. Mostly did not. Because if you're trying to accuse him of anything, then I'm not going to be involved in it. Because I say he didn't, okay? I say he did not.
I'm not accusing him.
I'm not, yeah, you are. That's what that was. I'm straightforward too.
Can we just talk?
No, I'm straightforward too. I don't think he did. And you're not going to involve him in it.
can't do it then.
Yes, it does.
It doesn't. It doesn't. Amy, hold on one second.
No, I'm not.
Let's give us
I said no.
one piece of
I said
information.
no. No means no. I gotta go. I'm back.
Okay, air conditioner's working because my office is hot. You know what? So it works in here. We'll chill it. Yeah. Thanks for coming back.
Hold on.
You need anything?
I just need a minute. Wait a minute.
You need anything?
And then they searched Angel and Raymond's place. At which point Raymond, he went to the police and he said, whoa boy, have I got a story for you. You're not going to believe this. Pretty much out of nowhere, during an interview with Moody on May 5th, 2022, he confessed to the kidnapping and murder of Brittanee Drexel in 2009.
The Drexel girl walking along the sidewalk and smoking pot. She noticed that, walked over through the door and said something about that smells like good weed. I said, yeah, you want some? Sure. Get in. She hopped right in the back without a problem.
When she got in the vehicle, did you know it was for a bad purpose?
No, not at all. That didn't even cross my mind. Things got out of hand. And I panicked and she panicked. And I strangled her.
In order to corroborate his story, Moody told detectives exactly how they would find Brittanee's body. He told them she'd be roughly 4 feet down, naked and buried face down. He even told them which direction she was facing. Brittanee's remains were found in a gated private drive on the outskirts of Georgetown, South Carolina on May 11th and 12th, around 33 miles from where she'd vanished. Now, Moody had already served 21 years of a 40-year sentence for the kidnap and rape of an 8-year-old girl in California. So yeah, fuck this guy. What's really terrifying about Raymond Moody is that we have no idea what he was up to, during those 13 years. He's clearly a repeat, violent offender, and usually those tend to be escalations, and they don't usually tend to take 13-year-long breaks. You know what I mean? He would have been doing, he could have been up to all sorts of shite during those years. Whether they just weren't reported to authorities, or Raymond was just never considered a suspect in them, we will never know. Raymond Moody's version of events was that he was driving in Myrtle Beach with his girlfriend Angel, and they just happened to see Brittanee walking along the road. The three of them, they started shooting the shit, and they were smoking, and they asked, they were smoking the devil's lettuce, and they asked Brittanee, hey, you wanna, have a puff pass, brother? She got in, and then they were like, hey, listen, you wanna come back to our motel? Chill for a bit? She says, yeah. Basically, the point being, Raymond's story was that Brittanee got in his car voluntarily. He'd no kidnapping, no sorry. They then instead went out to somewhere in the woods, chilled for a bit, smoked a little bit more. Sometime later in the evening, Angel left Moody and Brittanee alone. Moody tried to make a move on Brittanee, and obviously the 17-year-old girl wasn't interested in him and rejected his advances, which made him furious. Raymond Moody assaulted her before strangling her in a fit of rage. How much of Moody's account is true will probably never be known. But, I mean, I'll hazard a guess that it's very, very fucking little. Moody insists, she got in voluntarily, that his plan was never to hurt her, or to do anything to her, she didn't want, which, judging by his previous shit, it seems very unlikely. I think it was probably his plan all along. Brittanee was also not really into doing drugs or even stuff like weed, and that's why she wasn't enjoying her time in Myrtle Beach that much, because all of her friends were. So the fact that she would get into a stranger's car and do that kind of stuff also seems very unlikely. His one request to the police, while admitting all of this, bullshitting all of this, was that they don't go after Angel, which is like, should they be? Maybe they should, why, He swore she was not involved and had left before anything happened between him and Brittanee. Detectives simply told him they had no interest in Angel and didn't think she had anything to do with the crime. Personally, whether or not she was involved, we don't know. Before the fact, after the fact, who knows? Though it seems, just theorizing here, that it seems unlikely she wouldn't have been aware about what was happening.
She was never in a vehicle with you.
No, never a vehicle with me, no, period.
She probably warrants a little bit of a further look. She was there with Brittanee that day. She just happened to walk away when Raymond decided to attack her. Then even in the days after, when Brittanee's disappearance, and it was all over the news, like this was huge, that she disappeared. She never once, saw a billboard with Brittanee's face on it and thought, I've seen her, and I've seen her with Raymond Moody, and he's also he's a predator, he's a piece of shit. That's odd.
The proffer statement that Voss, she does admit that she indeed was in the car that night when they picked up the teen. Now, she was also with them at the campsite where Moody then raped and murdered her, though both have maintained that Voss was not there at the time. She told investigators her son had called and she had left for a period of time before returning. Now, no charges have been filed against Voss, and the solicitor's office has not mentioned any intent to do so. However, if it's learned later on that she was not being 100% truthful during that proffer statement, charges could still be pursued in the future.
In 2022, Raymond Moody pleaded guilty and was finally sentenced to life plus 60 years in prison for 3 felony charges relating to the murder of Brittanee Drexel.
I was a monster. I was a monster then. And I was a monster when I took Brittanee Drexel's life.
There's been some speculation as to what prompted his sudden confession, especially after he appeared at his sentencing looking frail. In fact, he's lost one eye already to illness. Good. Leading to some speculation that he's suffering from a serious, life-shortening or fatal condition. So yeah, sometimes bad things do happen to bad people. So that's the sad story of Brittanee Drexel, and it's a case with a lot of victims in it. I mean, obviously, it's Brittanee herself who's the main victim here, but you had the Taylor family, subjected to horrific allegations, and rumors and all this stuff for years and years and years. I mean, I was going to make a video about this case, I think back in 2019, and he was still the main suspect. Then, if I had made a video about it, I probably would have been pointing the finger at him like everybody else. But that just goes really absolutely to show you never know how these things will turn out. But it's also a story of a real piece of shit, an evil monster who's hiding in plain sight for over a decade. And of course, young Brittanee, a girl who was just starting out in life, who just wanted to blow off some steam and enjoy time away with friends, away from the watchful eye of her parents who were going through turbulence, which had caused her a lot of difficulty. She just happened to run into a monster, couldn't have happened to anyone. So try and, I guess, make sure it doesn't happen to you. Stay safe. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you being here with Misha watching this whole video. Guys, it always really means a lot, so thanks, lads. And yeah, I'll see you, soon. I mean, kind of doing 2 videos a week. Well, it's like 2 videos most weeks. Sometimes it'll be 1 video a week because it's a lot making 2 videos a week, so I don't want to get burnt out again or anything. So yeah, I'll see you when I see you, but it'll be soon. Don't worry, I'm not going anywhere. But until then, please take care of each other and yourselves, because I love you. Mike out.